You're watching the Property Guru Asia Real Estate Summit 2020 Virtual Edition. We've reached the fourth and final segment of our summit. In this segment, we'll listen to our global expert speakers to tackle the human pillar aspect of sustainability. We'll now listen to our next panel discussion with some of the biggest developers in the region. This session features industry leaders and decision makers who will be discussing the emergence of smarter, healthier, and safer cities worldwide. Please welcome our panel moderator, Stephen Oehme, Value Management Specialist and Sustainability Advocate and Managing Director of Quantum Thailand Limited. And panel speakers, Chanond Ruangkritya, Chief Executive Officer, Ananda Development. Gaynor Reid, Vice President of Communications and CSR, Accor in Southeast Asia. Kristin Thorsteins, Partner, Portman Investment, Pte. Limited. Lynette Leong, Chief Sustainability Officer, CapitaLand Group. Shaishav Dharia, CEO, Townships and Annuity Assets, Lodha Group, India.
Thank you so much for joining the panel today. This panel is leaders who are creating smarter, healthier, and more sustainable cities. And it's really terrific that you have all joined us. The range and diversity of projects that you've been involved in is extreme. Some of these projects have a long past. Some of them are fairly new and are going through a sustainability journey today. And some projects, of course, their future hasn't yet started, and they're going to be going through a sustainable journey that is going to flow from our current situations, discussions like this, 2021 and beyond. When thinking about sustainability throughout the course of the summit, we have been focused on four pillars of sustainability: the environment, the social, the human, and the economic. And we'd like to break down the discussion a little bit under those pillars. Of course, they are all intertwined, but we'd like to look at those slightly separately, and starting off with the environmental. The environmental sensitivity, awareness, and focus in the built environment has been there for some time. The Intergovernmental Panel for Climate Change, the IPCC, formed in 1988. In 1990, 2 years later, BREEAM in the United Kingdom had a rating tool for buildings. 3 years later, 1993, the US had LEED. Within 10 years, there were rating systems and environmental initiatives and focus all over the world. And a lot of the projects that have occurred in the last 20 years have been captured by those, some very well, some less so, etc. In terms of where we are today and where we are in the future, what is currently driving environmental decision-making in the region? And what future directions and outcomes for environmental sustainability do we think we can expect?
You know, from my perspective, as in Thailand, we wish we could, say much more. That we do have like a Thai version of a LEED certificate as well, called TREE. It's a lot of things we do here with the local government is the leadership, I hate to say it, in the government, they have a lot of issues to deal with. At the end of the day, the issue of the environment, is it important? Is it urgent? Yes, but right now Thailand has its own political problem with the government as well. And with the COVID, we even have like the fine dust PM 2.5 in the wintertime. Now everybody used to look forward to having cooler weather in Bangkok, but now when cool weather comes, wind from the north come. You know what? Each winter, the wind from China blows over Thailand, and that's the whole rest of Thailand. It's like a basin, like a valley. in Southeast Asia. So we get all that as well. So it's definitely becoming such a high impact that the scale of the impact it's I don't know how we're going to fix it. As a property developer, we try to do the local side of the equation, but certain environmental issue, it's regional and it's global. We all know all that. As I spoke to you earlier, and I feel like I'm not doing enough. I wish I had more solution to share, but I think there's a lot of, biggest companies in the world are oil company. Real estate also accounts for, I think, about 40% of CO2 emission from cement production. Biggest companies in Thailand are cement companies and petroleum fossil companies. Then what's the economic equation, right? And I think the economic balance isn't there anymore. You have a lot of free riding issue. The trade, we're not pricing these global impact for sustainability, and I think the world's paying for it. And I think we're definitely living in a false reality right now. I wish I could have more positive things to share and say about the Thai government doing much more, but I think there's always urgent issue, this and that. But as developer, we try to do our best. We try to promote living and losing your car, living on a train station and so forth. But the COVID came, and right now, actually people in our country, or in Thailand in particular, in Bangkok in particular, are less, there's less usage of the mass transit. The individual private transports is back in the game. We asked everybody, hey guys, our business model is basically transit-oriented development. We only say, hey, we're only going to invest around the mass transit. And I think that's the most sustainable way to live in the future. But now everybody's like, well, we're not going to ride on the mass transit. We're actually going to take our own, let's do our own cars. And the ride sharing service is actually doing quite well, even with this, and people want to live on the outskirts. So our business is actually getting hurt by people are being scared of living in a city. And so the new normal, so to speak, you got to try to figure that out, how long it's going to last with the vaccine and all.
Yes, I really appreciate what you're saying. And I think there's so much more that can be done everywhere, and so much more support, so much more cohesion that can happen and needs to happen in relation to sustainability. And as you said, the carbon emissions from the built environment, 40% plus, and CO2 levels are rising every year. Maybe we'll see a slight dip in that because of COVID, but that'll only be a transitory thing. Shaishav, you've been involved in some terrific green frontier environmental real estate developments. Could you help tell us how that's been able to occur in India, what the drivers have been, what are the decision-making parameters and support been?
Sure. So, I'll separate into one. There is obviously the larger goal around environmental sustainability that happens at the country level or at the state level. As much as one would like to have an influence on that part, you're quite limited in that aspect. So our focus is within what we control. We're India's largest real estate developer. And as part of what we do, we develop a series of townships and also a privately developed city called Palava, which eventually, spread across 2,000 hectares. So now in that particular context, environmental sustainability is something we can actually control to some extent. And the effort has been to do the right thing. And over the years, we've actually found that the focus on environmental sustainability is in line with the economic goals as well. So it's not like it's costing a whole lot more, and hence whether you need to make the trade-offs or not. So for example, we started in 2010 just the air quality and the focus of the number of trees we've planted out there, we probably have the best air quality index in urban India today, given the land mass and the sheer quantum of green we've been able to create out there. So that's a big plus. And today we designed the entire city around a concept of 5, 10, 15, which is everything that you need every day should be in a 5-minute walk. Things that you need maybe once a week should be in a 10, 15-minute walk. So whether it's your place of worship or your bus stop or your place of work, try to make it a walking city. Strangely, during the COVID time, having all of this so much in the walking distance helped us tremendously because, during lockdowns, you only had limited hours to move around. So in its own way, the whole walking concept actually paid off even better. This in turn obviously helps us in reducing our carbon footprint. Or the third thing was, we run a massive shuttle of buses that are sustainable to the various business centers across the city where our residents work, to reduce the amount of from private cars. Now that actually helps us because it keeps the traffic low. So I think these are the things we've been trying to do as a private developer on our end. But to the point made earlier, some of those things one has to now rethink. So for example, nobody wants to use, a public bus or, a bus fleet because of social distancing. So everybody's going on their own cars. Auto sales, if I'm not wrong, across the world are probably at the best they've done in every country in the last few months, right? So we're actually moving the wrong way. So these are some of the new challenges. And so what we believe, and we are starting to see, is that, of course, there'll be a transition period till the vaccine comes, but from every crisis, there's an opportunity. So for example, we genuinely believe that offices that were only in business districts, where everybody came in from residential to commercial, I think many of them are starting to talk to us or already creating satellite offices which are closer to the residential homes. So that allows you in a much shorter way to get to your place of work rather than traveling long distances. So in the long run, something like that will create an opportunity to reduce the carbon footprint from travel and hopefully get back to our goals. So, long answer, but that's how we kind of see sustainability and what we can as a private developer do to contribute to the larger cause.
No, Shaishav, thank you so much. Lynette, your perspective from Singapore and CapitaLand's projects.
I don't know how much the audience knows about CapitaLand. Perhaps just a very quick introduction. We may be headquartered in Singapore, but we have a very global footprint in more than 220 cities around the world. And we are also in in various asset classes, ranging from office, retail, lodging, residential, logistics, data center. So it is a pretty complex portfolio, I would say, and therefore the environmental impact to our portfolio is tremendous when we look at and it varies from asset class to asset class. And we are also in development. We also have completed projects. So when we look at environmental sustainability, I think largely we have seen changes in the stakeholders' perspective and the stakeholder demands that are coming to us and causing us to rethink a lot of our investment decisions. So one of them is our investors, our institutional investors. The very large ones nowadays have got analysts who just look at environmental, social, and governance factors of each company. So they no longer just evaluate companies to invest in based on financial performance, but they look at the performance on sustainability. One of the driving forces that causes us to rethink about how we look at our business. I think Chung Charan talked about the regulators, and I think there's also a very big driving force. In Singapore, the Singapore government has pledged that Singapore be carbon emissions neutral by the second half of the century. And we are faced with a lot of environmental effects. For example, the level of seawater rise is going to make Singapore a lot lower. And the government is spending about $100 billion to shore up our coastline. We are seeing that in Jakarta, for example. Jakarta government is moving out of Jakarta because of sea level rises. So some of these physical risks are very real. We have a big presence in Singapore and China, and China is committed to being carbon neutral by 2060. We have presence in Japan and in Korea as well. And similarly, the governments have pledged to be carbon neutral by 2050. So with the government's moves in that direction, you can imagine the amount of regulation that's going to come through in the countries that we operate in the form of carbon taxes, for example. That's certainly going to rise. And in Singapore, it's still at a very low level, but the government is trying to get us to get used to this concept of carbon tax, and for sure it's going to rise. So that's a kind of, and at the same time, we are looking at our customers, our tenants in our various property types. They are looking at environmental sustainability and myriad different types of perspectives. And with COVID-19, a lot of our tenants are more mindful about indoor air quality. And we've stepped that up in many of our properties during this whole period of the pandemic. So I think the environment is now taking a much larger attention in how we are looking at not just the external environment, but the internal environment as we provide health and safety for our tenants. That's maybe on the risk side, but on the opportunity side, we are also looking at financial institutions, looking at sustainable finance as a way to spur the capital towards this area. And CapitaLand has issued a number of sustainability-linked loans that pegs the interest rate against the performance of sustainability across the entire group. And if we're able to meet certain sustainability targets, our interest rate is reduced. So that gives us the financial incentive to do more. So I know we were going to be talking about some economics of sustainability, but we are seeing both sustainability, environmental sustainability, as well as other forms of sustainability, not just being a risk, but a reward as well in many respects. So I think that certainly there is a lot of driving force towards sustainability now. And so as developers, as property owners, we're not looking at just green buildings anymore. I think that sustainability is now covered myriad areas that we are looking at. And as a result of that, CapitaLand has just issued a 10-year master plan that where we have set certain ambitious targets for us to meet in the next 10 years. And it covers environmental, social, as well as governance pillars.
No, so thank you so much. That's really terrific. Kristin, would you like to add in relation to the environmental sustainability side?
Yes, so just a few words about where I come into all this. I used to be a hotel developer. So when the COVID crisis hit, I thought to myself that probably the last thing the world would need for a while is more hotels. So I co-founded a company that invests in startups and advises startups. The EU Green Deal is being transposed in national regulations, which then impact how sustainability is integrated into the way things are done. And this is not the case in places like Thailand, as Chanond pointed out. But it's not just in Southeast Asia. When we look at the enormous fiscal stimulus that the various countries are putting out in response to the COVID-19 crisis, there is a missed opportunity, because a lot of this money could have gone into supporting a transition towards green energies and providing investment and relief into green innovations. And sadly, it's not the case. And here I'm talking about rich industrialized countries like Australia and Japan, which could have gone down that route, but it did not happen. So even in the face of a black swan event like COVID-19, which is intricately linked to environmental sustainability and the lack of and the impact on biodiversity, even in the face of such crises, governments fail to seize the opportunity to direct investments into green energy transitions and sustainability. Well, but having said that, what is driving the sustainability? Then it goes down to, like Shaishav mentioned, it goes to what each of us can do. And as Lynette was mentioning, the requirements from investors. There is the United Nations Net Zero Asset Owner Alliance, which includes big institutional investors like AXA and Allianz, where they can only invest in buildings that are of a certain green rating. So I wouldn't call it grassroots, but alliances like these are very helpful in pushing forward the sustainability agenda, as are alliances like the Construction Declare, which is a global petition that unites all strands of construction in the built environment to make a commitment towards positive actions in response of the climate crisis. So, and nobody is an island, anyone can contribute. And in regions where sustainability is not dictated from above, it kind of becomes the responsibility of companies to try to fill some of that void.
Yes, no, thank you. Gaynor, would you like to come in on the environmental sustainability?
Sure. I think from our perspective, one of the best things about working for Accor is that we are a French company. And I think the French really are setting the benchmark for the world. So you have the Paris Climate Agreement. Accor has had a sustainability policy since 1970, so well before a lot of our competitors. But, you know, for us, it's not just about limiting your impact now, but actually giving back to the future. And I think that's something that both Lynette and Kristin have touched on, that we have to go beyond what we're doing today. We have to think about how we can, for example, use solar energy in our hotels to not just provide the energy that we need, but to actually put energy back into the community, to reduce waste, not just for our own use. You know, we know that hotels are very high impact environments. You know, we have 1 million guests, we have 200 million meals served a day. We have to come up with a way of negating our impact. But for me, it's really looking at not just saying, well, I, Gaynor, have this much negative impact and I want to reduce my impact. I want to give positively. And I think that's something that Accor is really looking at doing. So giving positively back to the environment, you know, making sure that our hotels are looking towards the future, because there is no tourism. And in fact, there's no world without us looking after the future.
No, thank you. And I think that does lead us nicely into two pillars of sustainability, the human and social. With carbon CO2 emissions, with energy, with waste, etc., they're things that we can really put numbers on. And so therefore we can really measure them and really look at performance, benchmarking, etc. This less so with human and social pillars of sustainability. And I'm just would be very interested in your input in relation to what is currently happening in sustainability and what's going to be happening in the future, the impacts, challenges and opportunities for human and societal aspects. How are they being recognised? How are they being championed now? And what are the strongest aspects that are being considered in the region? And how do we think that those will evolve? And not necessarily in the region, because as we've said a number of times already in the panel, that we're very joined up around the world.
So for us, you know, you talk about the 4 pillars. For Accor, we've got 2 main pillars. So it's people and places. And under people, we have giving back to communities and also diversity and inclusion. And obviously in places, we have sustainability in terms of planet and environment. But for us, you know, one of the biggest things I think that this crisis has taught us is that we're all only as strong as the most vulnerable amongst us. So at the very outset, back in March, we put aside 70 million euro to look after our most affected staff members who were either stood down or furloughed and no longer could pay their bills. And I think, you know, all of us here are based in Asia Pacific. We don't realize that there are people out there who basically are living on salaries of $5, $6 a week, who now are not earning anything. So we know that poverty is going to grow. We know that there's a huge impact from this crisis. So I think it's all of our responsibility to make sure, again, it's thinking about the bigger picture and how we can give back. And we've already helped 35,000, 40,000 people in our own teams, but also given some of that money to frontline workers who have been putting themselves at risk, you know, just to save the rest of us. And for me, we've always had programs. It's got to be long-term as well. Everything you do, you can't just give money to something. You have to come up with a solution. So a lot of what we do is around training and education based. But one of the best things for me about this crisis, I think what we need to realize now is we're all part of a bigger world, but smaller neighborhood. And we need to give back to those people who are local. And it's all about people at the end of the day.
Yes, thank you so much, and I fully agree with you. Shaishav, you mentioned earlier when we were talking about the environment, so many of the aspects were from a human and societal perspective. How much has that really driven what you're currently doing, and how do you think that will evolve?
Yeah, no, I think, so for a place like India or Mumbai, where I'm based out of, COVID has definitely increased the focus on personal sanitation, cleanliness, importance of the notion of sustainability. It'll mean different things to different people, but eventually it comes back to, again, doing things in a better way. So I think that has definitely increased. And the focus on health at a human level is gone up more than before. So the importance of where we live, the access to, you know, I think places like Singapore, where some of you are based, is just a given. But in, you know, more developing countries, it's something that doesn't always happen. So the importance of places you live, which have parks and open spaces, and whether you can bicycle, so you can still be socially distant but be active, I think has seen a huge spike. So you are starting to see a fundamental change in the way people think. And then as I talk to my own teams, you know, we probably have about 25% of the headquarters staff, which is back in the office. The rest are still work from home. And I am almost certain that, you know, whenever all our public transport starts up, and if you tell them they're going to have to travel 1.5, 2 hours to come to the office, and then 1.5, 2 hours to go back, that's not going to happen, right? So we are already seeing them pressurize us on creating satellite offices for them closer to where they live. And so in a way, you know, the behavior of doing the right thing is changing, and, you know, not just us as a group, but also all of our corporate tenants are starting to change in the same manner. So I think COVID has definitely created, in different definitions, the importance of sustainability down to almost every individual level, which is great.
Oh, absolutely. Lynette, with your CapitaLand's huge geographical footprint, from the human and social side of sustainability and how that is informing and evolving in decision-making for CapitaLand.
Well, the pandemic has certainly raised the level of awareness of the importance of the social element of sustainability. And during this period, I think that one of the main focuses is to enable our customers, our communities to continue to thrive. And so we have spent more than $2 million in Singapore and $6 million the rest of the world to help our communities that have been impacted by the pandemic to continue to operate. And at the same time, we have also instilled employee volunteerism. So more than 1,000 employees have come forth to give their time. And in Singapore, there has been a lot of impact on the migrant workers. So we have just got people together to build accommodation for the migrant workers and to house them properly. And also to mobilize food and other basic necessities for people who've been impacted by that. But I think going forward, in our master plan, what we see the social aspect of sustainability as important is enabling thriving and future adaptive communities. So in that respect, one of the key areas of focus is clearly our people. So the human capital element of training them to be more future adaptive, such as upgrading the skill set in the area of digitalization, for example. And here we are seeing all using the Zoom and the other virtual platforms so often that it's become a necessity that people become more future adaptive with the use of digital technology. So we're spending more than $5 million to equip our staff to do that. Another area we find that as a result of COVID-19, it's become more glaring is the supply chain. We've seen that there has been a lot of disruption to supply chain as a result of the pandemic. And so we are also looking, the challenges in the supply chain has been magnified. And therefore, we are looking at how to make our supply chain more robust as well as more diversified. And so we're looking at different areas. And one of the areas that is very meaningful to us is to be able to build more collaborative relationships with our supply chain in order to help them to thrive, as well as to help ourselves to be more resilient to any future challenges that may come ahead. Another area is about our customer relationships. So again, as a result of COVID-19, we have stepped up efforts in understanding the needs of our customers better in order to create products and services that will cater to their needs. And on sustainability, it is also bringing them along this journey of being sustainable with us. And one of the ways is to go into what we call a green lease structure. So when in addition to signing a typical lease with us, they also sign a green lease so that we are able to incorporate some of the more important sustainability elements into their lease and as they occupy the premises. For example, if they are fitting out their offices, we encourage them to use more sustainable type of materials. And in our construction, we also use sustainable materials in our different elements of construction. So we bring the entire, the other stakeholders that we have influence in along this journey with us, so that we are able to meet sustainability targets together.
No, thank you very much, Lynette. Kristin, with your very significant history with hospitality and now in startups, the human and social perspectives of sustainability, where we are and where we're going?
Yes, I actually think, like I'm sure Gaynor will agree, that the hotel industry has been quite good at integrating social sustainability into most aspects of their business, because for the hospitality industry, it's purely demand-led. People want to be sure of that when they are going to a destination, them being there does not have an adverse impact on the environment or the community where the hotel or the resort is located. And hospitality and hotels have been such enormous driver of pulling people out of poverty in countries around the world. And we are seeing the impact now, and the risk of the millions of people going back into poverty because they've lost their jobs in hotels and resorts and airline. We see the huge importance of this industry on social sustainability. The ability of a hotel to positively influence a local community is probably greater than most industries. It's not the direct economic impact in terms of jobs and training. It's also the indirect impact that comes from, for instance, local sourcing, which can be anything from food to building materials, which goes back to what Lynette was mentioning about how the supply chains have been disrupted as a result of COVID. And this will be even more important going forward because of COVID. So for the hotels and resorts that will thrive after this crisis, they will be even greater drivers of social sustainability in the communities where they are located.
No, thank you. Chanond, in relation to human and social sustainability and the developments where we are today?
Well, for our country in Thailand in particular, you know, I think we still have a lot of human rights issue over here as well. You know, I'm not here to promote. I'm here to be more factual and real. I think we still have a lot of migrant workers here who are not fully legal. I think we've been making a lot of progress in that front in terms of properly taking care of the migrant workers. But I think still Thailand's still lacking behind in the rights issue of the migrant workers as well. You know, then we for our company, since we're a listed company, you know, all the migrant workers who work with us definitely have to be registered and in the whole value chain. But I do suspect that in terms of entire value chain, you know, you have the manufacturers of certain materials. We don't have a system where we actually investigate to the entire value chain of who's actually you know, using these migrant workers in a correct way or not. So that's probably something that I in Thailand need to work on a lot as well. We don't have you know, certain seafood industries would have authorities from the EUs to come in to investigate that. In terms of our industry, we actually don't have that. We think we should have that, and a lot of smaller developers who definitely need to compete on costs would probably end up using certain companies and turning a blind eye to the suppliers and so forth. So that's what I'm seeing in terms of human and sustainability over here.
Yes, Gaynor, please go ahead.
I was just going to say, further to what Kristin was saying, you know, I've seen that apparently 38 million people are going to go back into poverty as a result of COVID, when 22 million of those people are actually coming out of it without that. And, you know, to everyone who's watching this, this panel, I would say if there's anything you can do to help you know, create sustainability, to give back to local communities, to make sure we're doing local sourcing of produce and products and supplies, you know, coming back to Lynette's point about supply chains as well. Living here in Singapore at the Fairmont and Swiss Hotel Complex, we've got a 450 meter, I think, aquaponics farm. Don't quote me on the meterage, it's not that big, but it supplies 1,200 kilos of greens, so salads and herbs and lettuce and things, and 350 kilos of fish, of seafood per month. That is really reducing our need to source externally. It's all naturally grown and local, so it tastes better. It's looking after the environment. Those sort of things, when you're talking to architects and designers who are in your audience, it's saying to them, like, please come up with other ways to give back. Make sure we're using sustainable materials. Make sure we're thinking about communities and how can your design bring in the locals in the neighborhood? How can you know, supply chains utilize local suppliers to give back to the, you know, we're a big international company, but 85 to 90% of what we make goes back into local communities. We need to make sure that that is the focus for everything we do going forward, or this whole world is going to end up in such a mess.
No, again, thank you for saying that. And in relation to what Chanond said about not necessarily knowing the full credentials of the source of certain materials, etc., the issues in relation to labour and how legal it is and how ethical it is, etc. Unfortunately, I mean, that's not just an issue in Thailand or in the Asia Pacific region. And we just can look at the fashion industry all over the world to know that so many people are making purchases and making decisions, which is what this panel is about. They're making decisions and they don't know, and they do care, but somehow they've separated their caring and their actions. And this is something that's happening everywhere in the world. Chanond, you know, mentioned about the labour, and one of the things that I was involved in the Middle East, the GCC Labour Summit, where I was the chairman, and we were able to make sure that migrant workers knew what their contract conditions would actually be, not the promise, but the reality of what. We also made sure that their wages on a monthly basis went into a bank account rather than being in cash and very often, unfortunately, delayed. It was the leadership of the people in the development sector that really said, we are going to do these things, really carefully and clearly thought about those things, and then made the decisions, and then really communicated onto a market to say, look, this is what we're doing the right thing. And those things transformed the marketplace. We went from the built environment providing WPS, worker protection system, to going to all of the domestic helpers and so many more in the Middle East. There really is a ability for us in our industry to really make transformations, and I strongly believe that in sustainability. I think it's occurring already, but there is a long, long way to go. But also, coming to our last pillar, I think it really makes economic sense. When we look at what Google did with their built environment for offices and said we have to be 150 feet from food, very similar to Shaishav's philosophy for a whole entire city, that has enabled Google to, from a human and social point of view, attract, build and retain talent. And that has an enormous link to their standing financially, economically today. Starbucks, we previously used to think of buildings as a place of home, place one. Place two was a place of work. And then Starbucks was enchanted by the idea of a third place. And that simple idea then put across the world has made them an extremely wealthy, economically successful player. In relation to sustainability, to leadership, the built environment, and the economics, the challenges, the risks, and the opportunities. Lynette?
I think a lot of people tend to think that being sustainable means higher cost. And to some extent, I think it could be correct, but I think people have not really quantified the benefits that have come from being sustainable. So we are developing a metric internally known as return on sustainability. And what we are doing is to quantify the benefits and looking at it as a form of return to us by being sustainable. So in all our investments now, we are looking at not just the financial return, but we are comparing that investment with and without sustainability and quantifying the pros and cons. It is still a work in progress, but we are, for the past 12 years, we have been collecting data on the environmental benefits that we have achieved from our entire portfolio. And we've discovered that we have achieved actually 11% cost avoidance as a result of being sustainable, in 11% of operating expenses as a result of a reduction in our utilities cost. So that is a very significant figure, we think. So if you're able to quantify other aspects, for example, by being, if you're able to mitigate a lot of these physical or risks to our assets, so that's another element of return. And supply chain, for example, if we are able to help if we are able to ensure that our supply chain has a certain code of conduct, and we do have that, our supply chain has to abide by our code of conduct that insists on, for example, regular payment to their workers and so forth. So if you're able to do that, then it could actually help us to improve the quality of our products and services. So all these things, I think if you're able to quantify that, that is a very powerful aspect of looking at sustainability. And certainly, I mentioned earlier about sustainable finance. When we are able to get sustainability linked loans and we are able to demonstrate sustainability performance, and as a result of which we get a reduction in interest rate and interest savings, and that's another area of financial return. So I think it's quantifying that return either in monetary terms or in other aspects. For example, is that reducing the downtime to lease a property, and you get higher occupancy rates. So I think it becomes a very powerful thing. And at the same time, we're looking at new innovation, because a lot of the sustainability targets we've set for ourselves for the next 10 years is impossible to achieve by today's technology. So we're looking at new innovations, and that you can spur new ideas, and the new businesses can sprout from there as well. So I think there are abundant opportunities that we could possibly tap on in the future.
No, thank you. Gaynor, please.
I think from an economic perspective, we've done some surveys at Accor. So we did a survey with Accenture and EY that basically told us that we can win business by being sustainable. That companies, government businesses especially, are looking for companies that are sustainable. So 74% of survey respondents said they will go with a company that has a CSR policy versus one that doesn't. We know actually that our hotels who have signed up, we have a Planet 21 program, and you can be bronze level, silver level, or gold and platinum. And the ones that really engage in CSR more heartily actually are more profitable. So we know that while there may be some additional costs at the outset to be sustainable, the long-term benefits, you know, from putting solar powers in, from saving energy, from saving food waste. In one hotel alone, at the Sofitel Sukhumvit, Bangkok, we realized they'd saved $60,000 just by investing in a Winnow food waste technology system, which is not expensive to put in. But you think about that versus, you know, on the scale of 5,000 properties that we have around the world, that adds up. So it's not just that. You talk about the economic benefit, but I think today's employees, doesn't matter if they're millennials or my age, and I'm well beyond millennial, they want to work for a company that is responsible, and you feel pride, and that comes through in the service that you give people. So there's so many benefits from doing the right thing and knowing that we all want to work for a company that does the right thing. And I think it's not just economic, but the best thing we can do in terms of going out to our partners and our owners is explain to them the bottom line, because we know that developers and owners care about the bottom line. So if you can present it that not only are you doing something great for the planet, but your bottom line will be healthier as well. So we all win from that.
No, thank you, Gaynor. I was thinking through a number of the discussions and feedback that how all of the financial advantages that you can get from pursuing sustainability, I think are very real, very tangible. But I would like to challenge the notion, as a number of people of us have said, that sustainability doesn't necessarily have to cost more. And I really think that that is a really important message, because what's happening in our industry, as we've got more and more specialized, we've got specialized consultants and practitioners on the team, etc., and they're very focused on their area of expertise. And there are gaps, there is conservatism, there are mistakes that are perhaps not corrected, and many other issues where, when we really look in detail at things, we don't necessarily have to reduce the carbon footprint only by putting additives and optimizing concrete mixes, but we can also do it by just reviewing the design and making sure that we've actually got the minimum there, and that goes through all of the range. And once we don't see sustainability as a bolt-on, another consultant, another cost center, etc., and we look at it from a different point of view, we want to be more sustainable and we want to save more costs, I really do not feel that these are mutually exclusive. And Shaishav, you mentioned earlier when we were talking about environment, you said it doesn't necessarily have to cost more. Would you like to talk about the economic, not only the returns, but also the economic costs of sustainability?
I mean, I think the costs, I mean, when we've always evaluated as a private developer, engaging on a range of sustainable things, we used to look at it as, you know, the opportunities in three areas. One is it was good for the environment. It made economic sense. Second was it was really critical to the environment, may or may not be economically good, especially around things like water, where we see periodic challenges, shortages, etc., where you just do the right thing. And the third, so these are the two ways we almost always looked at every aspect. And if it fit in one of those two frameworks, it made sense to do it. I think in some of our asset classes, if I take, for example, offices today, what we need to do either in retrofit or change in our design for the new office buildings, especially around air quality, filtration systems, touchless systems, etc., it is going to cost more, right? Some of it over the longer term, as the building that does the right thing, we will have tenants who will respect it, and you will basically be able to deal with that part. But in the short run, there will be a cost. So what do you do then? So I think this is where innovation is going to start coming in much more. You know, you have certain cost increases. You're going to see a series of PropTech solutions in sustainability, You're going to see different innovative business models. You're going to see different ways we work, we live, which ultimately has to balance out whatever increase in cost is seen, because it does matter. So that's the way I think, just like in the past, renewable energy suddenly became actually economically better. The same is going to happen with these other cost increases from sustainability. Some other form of innovation technology will come in and then actually make it even better. So that's the way I see it.
Yes, no, terrific. Thank you. Kristin?
Yes, I think that when we look on the economic repercussions of sustainable choices, just to give you an example, I was speaking to an architect today who, which practice conceived a very prominent building here in Singapore. And he told me that at some point, shortly after the delivery of the building, they started tracking the PR value directly derived from the design of the building. And they stopped when they'd reached 60 million US dollars. So I don't know what hotel operator or hotel owner would have, so that's a kind of a PR budget, but it was money well spent. The 3 million that the architect got in fees was definitely well spent. So the economic benefits, they are there in different areas, not just in terms of running costs or better tenant mix. But then I absolutely agree with what Shaishav just said about the role of technology and the ability of technology in helping us measuring the impact of the various sustainable solutions that we are implementing. And because what you can't measure, you can't improve, what you can't act on. So just to give you an example, one of our companies that we're supporting is a French startup that has developed an IoT shower head that educates people on how to use less water and then transmits the data to a smartphone app. And this is something that the authorities in Singapore have become interested in, because they despite water not being expensive per se in Singapore, they know that the water situation in Singapore is such that people have to be very cognizant about the amount of water that they use. And this is just one example of many. Gaynor mentioned food waste is a huge issue in Asia, and we are seeing various innovations coming up there in helping us tackle that problem. So yeah, the economic downfall is it's on different level, ranging from PR to saving water and food.
Chanond, the economic risks, opportunities, challenges.
Well, I hate to say, but I'm not here to promote any of this. I think a lot of us here need to prove it in what we say. If we say and if we do the things we say or promote, or it's a natural signal anyways. If any products can prove itself that it's gonna save some money from a developer point of view, from a customer point of view, people will take it. And a lot of what we say in sustainability, it's what, like Kristin has said, if you can't measure it, you can't prove it, then it's a bunch of fluff. To me, I'm actually, a lot of sustainable, it's a lot of, like we say, greenwashing. Can we please prove it? Is there somebody that can tell me, yes, this is the matrix, this is my organization, I'll prove to you that I've done it, full stop. Then it's a tough, until we can do that, the economic decision is not going to be based on sustainability. I think the problem with the economic model is always, well, financial, you can prove your P&L, but you can't prove, Kristin, I work with a lot of PR companies. They always say, they spend 2 million and it's equivalent to 20 times worth. So I'm like, well, can you prove it? You know, okay, with digital marketing, yes, you can prove eyeballs and so forth, but with TV advertising, radio, you know, that's why everything's moving digital. Until we can find a model where we can, I think what we're doing right now, it's good to share, but until we can share and prove it to each other that it's real, I don't think we're going to ever get traction. Now, is this conference one more, I want to feel good and be sustainable? Are the listeners really, are we really making the impact to listeners? I don't know. I think we are trying to, but are we truly, let's say if Lynette can share, okay, these are the data, and PropertyGuru's conference can, you know, post this up, then anybody can use it as an open source, then I think we maybe will get some traction. Maybe what Kristin said, we can share those data, and any data we have, I think we need to perhaps take a step forward in our conversation to share data, and let's challenge each other in proving our point. That if I take on the challenge to prove something, then I'll get it measure. That's one of the things I've been promoting in Thailand with the university. That, you know, let's do it and prove it. And with the academic side coming into becoming the researcher, and not, you know, it's not a bunch of corporates trying to market themselves in a greenwashing, right? So that's what I want us all to do. I want to make myself accountable to what I say as well. And if we can share those ethos together, I think we finally might get some traction.
No, thank you. Lynette.
Since Kun Chanond mentioned my name, I'd like to respond to that. We're a listed company, and we have been issuing our sustainability report since 12 years ago, and that's really available publicly, and is also externally assured. And we do have those figures there, that where I mentioned just now that we have saved that much money, $208 million over the past 12 years in operating expenses as a result of cost of reduction in utilities. So that's only one point, and also sustainable finance, the interest reduction. We have not disclosed the amount because our banks are not allowing us to do that, but we have actually experienced that ourselves. So what we are taking a step further in doing is to quantify other forms of benefits, and that is a work in progress. But for the utilities cost reduction, that's real. So, and I think that you're absolutely right. I think it's about sharing this kind of methodology, and we are working with university here as well to quantify other forms of benefits. So we don't have the full answer yet, but we are seeing that coming through. And I think it is also about avoiding a bigger threat that's coming through. If you don't do anything about it, you're going to be slapped with a heavier cost in the future. And you're seeing carbon taxes being imposed by the governments already. And that's going to come in a more forceful way as the climate change does not get mitigated. So I think, I mean, we operate in China as well, and the Chinese government has declared it to be carbon neutral by 2060. And I think if the Chinese government says something, they will certainly do it. And there will be a lot of different kinds of regulatory pressures, or even, but at the same time, I think there's going to be a lot of innovation towards this area to solving the world's problems. And that's where I think the excitement is, and that's I think the financial benefits that we can gain from. But you're right. I think the measuring the quantifying the benefits is very important, and sharing it.
No, absolutely. Thank you. To achieve sustainability in our sector and in all sectors, you know, I think there's really three key ingredients. There's the vision and aspiration that we have to have, and I think in relation to sustainability on the four pillars, the vision and aspiration is there. Certainly the aspiration, and for so many people, the vision and certainly all of you have displayed in relation to vision. The second thing is the information to make the best decisions. And that's really why we thank you so much for joining the panel. And hopefully this will be a discussion of many and a lot of information sharing to really understand so that people can be making decisions with some assurance and some reliance. And that is just so fundamentally important. And then, of course, the third thing is actually after making that decision is really implementing them really well. The projects that you've mentioned, when people look at your websites and other resource materials, it will really help people understand about the implementation, what went right, what was unexpected, etc. All of those things, the more and more we share those things, it will move the market and the economic rewards will be even greater and greater. Unfortunately, we have run out of time. Thank you very much for your attendance at the Asia Real Estate Summit and especially for this panel session. Thank you very much.